All right, welcome back for our April update. This is Kristen Bentley with Western Flash. April was actually a really tough month for us. We got a huge amount of rain, and of course, since we have no arena, we just ride out in the fields and trails. A lot of rain meant it was pretty impossible for us to get a lot of riding done. And of course, then on the days that it was nice and dry, we had so many calves born with our beef herd in April that we spent most of our time running around catching and tagging and banding and checking on calves. So not a ton of time to ride, but I did get in maybe 8 to 10 rides with Wes. So right now you're just looking at a little bit of footage that I happened to take with one hand while riding him around. So he gets in some creek crossings, some work over natural logs. Right there I had to work on him to get him between two trees he would rather not go through. Of course, he's not super broke to neck reining yet, so it's a little bit of a challenge, but this has been a really good way to kind of bring that along and get him going. So he's turned into quite a fun little trail horse. On the really wet days, we were able to set out a couple of basic obstacles to work with, even though our fields were too wet to ride in. So a little footage here from working over some poles, which he's really wiggly about because he'd really rather not go over those. Then we move on to work him over a tarp, which he really did not enjoy. So here you can see I've got my reins long enough that he can still stretch down to look closer at that tarp. But of course the trick is keeping him then between the aids to encourage him to go forward and stay relatively straight. And he finally takes that big step to get over it. Good boy. So we kind of dinked around for, maybe 45 minutes or so and schooled these obstacles, and then he got a lot braver and a lot better. Took advantage there of some natural puddling to get him going a little braver through water. And you can see that he's much more confident now after, just some miles back and forth over these poles, that he now goes nice and straight, adjusts his stride, doesn't tick the rail too hard, steps over it, comes back over. So here at this point, I was thinking, well, let's start to move on to the next step, which is going to be to get him to stop over poles and then eventually to be able to side pass over them. So that's putting in all that lateral work I've been working on in past episodes, starting to install that into a little bit of a side pass. So here we're just going to take just a couple steps over to the right, just to get him thinking laterally. Good boy. So he comes off that rail in a little bit of a side pass. Eventually, in most ranch trail courses, they would want you to come up and halt next to the rail and then side pass completely over it. But I found that chunking it down into these little baby steps, where you position the horse so that he can side pass off the end of the rail, usually goes a lot better. So here he's a little bit too far forward, and then here he's figures out it's a little easier. He just shimmies his shoulder over and then walks away, which again is a fine intro step just to get him started, but we're going to go back and school that one a little bit again and get that a little bit more correct. So walking now over the first pole, we're going to get in position to do a left side pass off of the second pole. So first 2 feet over and stand. And again, chunking this down into baby steps. He stands first, then we ask for those lateral steps over. That was a pretty good attempt. Good boy. Here we are again after schooling on the tarp for a little bit. You can see we've opened that up all the way, and he's much more confident about putting his feet on it and walking over. So that was a nice win for him. He really did not like this tarp at all the first time it was introduced. So I'm happy that he got to this point being comfortable. He still is a little looky at it, but that's okay. I kind of like that expression, to be honest, more than a horse that's just a total deadhead over obstacles. So here we worked on just standing quietly on the tarp, because of course that's a much different task than just sort of rushing over it and moving on. So if he can stand there and be relaxed, that's fine. We're happy with that, and then we'll move on. Fortunately, it dried out enough at a few points of the month that we could get out to the pastures and just do a little bit of flat work. So now we're out in our grazing pastures as opposed to, the cover crop field where you saw me riding earlier in the winter. So here we're able to actually do a lot more figures, so circles, loops around, and not just sort of follow the rows of the crops up and down the field. So that gives us a lot more freedom to do a little more actual flat work. I'm going to ask Wes to do some circles and bend around. I also apologize for the shakiness of this video because I was making my husband ride our horse who does not like to stand still. So the poor man had his hands full trying to get Gandalf to stand still and video me. This was early in April, so you can see I'm asking for some transitions within the gait. Transitions from the walk to the trot to the lope are all important, but transitions within the gait and asking the horse to collect back a little bit, that's a big challenge, but that works really, really well to strengthen the core of the horse as well as the rider, and get him just to start thinking about scaling back a little bit. This is a little horse with a big, big stride. It actually looks a little easier to sit than it feels, so I'm glad it looks as rideable as it does in this video. This is at the end of April. So we've been doing a lot of exercises when I was able, going back to those transitions from walk to trot. So these circles, I'm able to ride him in a much smaller circle. Even though we haven't been riding a lot, it does seem like his core strength and his balance is really improving. So he seems to be a horse who does as well in the break as he does in the training. So it's good to know that I don't necessarily need to ride him 5 days a week for him to progress. So there you saw me do a very quick transition down to the walk, only for about 3 or 4 strides, and then right back to the trot again. So it's a different transition from just transitioning to the walk and just letting the horse relax on a long rein. That's a short transition, and that's to get him still to be thinking about using his core to hold himself back, slow down to the walk, and then right back to the trot again. So quick transitions like this are really good both for improving your aids and communication with your horse as a rider, but also to improve your horse's responsiveness, as well as, of course, as we've been saying, his strength and his balance. So you can see that Wes's trot overall is really developing. He's starting to take a little more weight off his forehand and balance onto his hocks and his haunches. And you can see too that his natural self-carriage has really improved. So, as I've mentioned earlier in this series, I don't really do a lot to mess with my horse's headsets. Where they are comfortable holding their head is where I'm going to let them be. I don't feel the need to crank horses' heads up or down. But as you can see, he's starting to really carry his pole at the level of his withers on his own. So I've not done a whole lot to ask him to bring that nose down. So that to me indicates that his core is getting way stronger and he's a lot more comfortable just carrying himself in this nice relaxed frame. And he's not always just towing himself along by his front end. He did come out and initially was pretty heavy on his forehand just as a general riding horse. So I'm really, really happy to see this improvement with not a lot of, gadgetry or schooling on my end. Just time and strength and patient riding. So a little more of these walk-trot transitions. I'm hoping in May that we're going to be able to work in some lope transitions. We did successfully lope a full circle on the left lead. No video evidence, but I promise it happened. The right lead, he's still not very balanced, so we're still just working on straight lines with the right lead because we don't want to tip him over like a little dirt bike. So we'll see how that goes. We do have our first horse show coming up in May. We are going to enter some lope classes because there's not a lot of walk-trot options. Unfortunately, because I won the open buckle last year on my thoroughbred, I am not eligible to enter the adult walk-trot classes. So Wes will be loping a little bit. We'll see how that goes. I am going to set the bar very low for him, and then that way he will hopefully exceed all of my expectations. So we're just going to go have a good time. That's going to be his first show away from home experience. So it'll be a big learning weekend for us, but I'm looking forward to having a good time. It's a very friendly show environment, so people are going to be very welcoming to my little standardbred rescue horse who's just learning how to function. And of course, Wes's favorite thing about April has been the herd's reintroduction back onto grass. So here he is, a happy little boy just stuffing his face. He's gotten lots of turnout time with his buddies, which of course is really, really good for herd dynamics and socialization. So it's been a good April to be Wes.